A New Phase is a horror short story. Some content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. Part 2. Hey man, this is gonna be fun. Thanks for coming. You're gonna have a blast. Wesley itched the back of his neck. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like somebody is waiting for us. Well, yeah, Corinne invited us. No, I mean like to jump out and scare us or prank us or something. I don't know. Oh, don't worry about that. It's all just harmless fun. There are plenty of people dorkier than us. We're probably no higher than third on the pranksters list. Scott chuckled at his own joke. Come on, let's go find Corinne and she can introduce us to her friends. Wesley nodded and moved forward, letting Scott lead the way into the front door past the strobing light. Inside, the music was loud enough that small talk was undoubtedly filled with shouting and requests to repeat what was said. There was a vampire in the living room with a bowl of chips, and a zombie in the corner sharing laughs with a witch. The hallway was narrow and not filled with bodies yet, but it seemed like it would be at any moment. The hallway opened into the kitchen where the crowd was the biggest. Scott immediately located Corinne, who was in a princess outfit, and in the middle of a small group of girls all hanging onto their red party cups. Corinne's eyes lit up when she recognized Scott. Oh hey, you made it! Corinne gave Scott a welcoming hug. We did. You remember Wesley, my roommate? Wesley said hello and started to wave, but was quickly wrapped in a hug by Corinne. Thank you guys for coming. Let me get you drinks. Corinne twisted her way through the steady forming crowd of the kitchen and brought back 2 red party cups for Wesley and Scott. She grabbed Scott by the hand and dragged him over to her group of friends. Wesley followed. Ladies, this is Scott and his roommate Wesley. Corinne turned to Scott and then to each girl in the circle for introductions. This is Leah, Brittany, and Karen. Wesley strained to hear everyone's name, but knew that even if they were in quieter settings, there was a good chance he would forget all their names in moments. Fortunately, the costumes were easier to remember. A rabbit, a doll, and a cheerleader. But he came here to get out of his comfort zone, so he decided to try and make small talk. He made eye contact with the girl closest to him, the rabbit, and reached out his hand. Hi, Leia? Like the princess? He could feel her hand lose life halfway through the handshake. Yeah, like I never heard that before. No, I'm sorry, I just wasn't sure. It's kinda loud in here. Wesley felt pretty sure he wasn't going to make a new friend after that eye roll. But now, he just didn't want her to hate him. Do you live here with Corinne? Yeah. Wesley paused, but soon realized there was no more to her answer. What's your major? Psych. I'm going to be a therapist. Wesley felt a small tug in their conversation. It was enough not to give up yet. That sounds cool. My aunt is a therapist, but if you ask me, I think she went to school to fix herself. She had like 9 husbands. Leia uncrossed her arms and acknowledged Wesley again. So, what are you studying? Do you have a major? Leah sipped from her cup. Well, I'm taking all the general classes, but I think I want to focus on writing or maybe art. I like to make things. I also like music a lot. Leia giggled. Sounds like you got it all figured out. Wesley laughed too. He noticed the party was starting to fill out and tried to sidestep some traffic while still maintaining a conversational distance from Leia. He reached around to rest his hand on a bar stool nearby. But more people were walking through, and as he shifted his weight to avoid them, the bar stool fell over. Wesley kept his balance, but the bar stool crashed over the music. The laughter seemed even louder, even though Wesley knew that wasn't possible. He smiled at Leia. She half smiled back and then moved back into her group of girls to rejoin their conversation. Wesley decided to take a break from making friends and just explore the rest of the party for a while. Wesley found himself sitting on the front porch of a party house with a few smokers, pirates, and robots. Although he kept out of the conversations, he felt like this was a better environment for him. Not being a part of the social circles also allowed him to look around and enjoy the festive decorations. He relaxed enough now to begin brushing off the embarrassing scene in the kitchen. He stood up and considered rejoining the party. Listening to the smokers chat about video games, a girl talking about her creepy teacher, and a guy whispering about local myths. Wesley searched for an opening. He edged himself towards the group discussing the tales around town. My uncle told me one night he was driving back from a bar in Dividing Creek, and there ain't nothing out there except cornfields. So he pulled over, 'cause he had to pee. Then he hears something in the field. At first, he thought it was a dog whimpering. So he zips up and looks closer. He sees blood on the ground, and he thinks some dumb hick must have hit a dog and kept going. He follows the trail into an opening, and he finds a farmer on the ground, shredded like a scarecrow, blood everywhere. Further in was a second body, not ripped apart, but definitely dead. Then he wonders what the noise he heard could have been, because it didn't come from either of these two. That's when the cornstalks start to move, and he hears a growl coming from the dark. My uncle said he was frozen in place. He still wasn't sure what he was seeing, but he finally got the power to move again when the creature came into the clearing. Standing there over top of those poor lost souls was the devil of Dividing Creek.
Wow.
No way!
Oh my God, what did he do?
He hauled ass, that's what he did. He said he ran faster than he ever ran, and he could hear the footsteps behind him. He got back to his car and floored it.
That's insane.
Yeah, and he said he was gripping the steering wheel the whole way home. When he finally got out of the car, he saw long scratches on his bumper that weren't there before. He was saying a prayer walking up to his house when he looked up and noticed it was a full moon. What?
Man, I believe that.
Wesley felt a natural opening in the conversation and was excited to join. I'm actually from Dividing Creek, and nobody that lives there really believes in the devil. It's more of a touristy thing. Before Wesley finished his statement, he could feel the temperature drop in his surroundings. It was followed by a pause and a unified stare from the group. The biggest of them, dressed in his football uniform, put his drink down and scowled. You what? Wesley attempted to rewind the last few seconds of his life. I just meant that I don't know of. The larger guy stood up and clenched his fist. Yeah, you don't know. Are you calling Johnny's uncle a liar? Because I know him. We all know him, and he's not some tool from nowhere. The guy that told the story, Johnny, clad in a vampire cape and collar, got up and tried to insert himself between Wesley and his angry friend. Come on, French, this kid doesn't know what he's talking about. Wesley stepped off the front porch. I'm sorry, I'll just go. Yeah, you should just go. Wesley put his head down and put distance between himself and the party house. He could still hear the group spouting anger toward him and a few voices pushing back. Wesley made his way down the street towards campus and spotted other people. He did his best to blend in with the other silhouettes migrating through. He looked back over his shoulder to see if any of the partygoers were tracking him down. He couldn't be sure if the shapes he saw were those of predators or shadows of the town. He quickened his pace and swiveled his head between the ground before him and the darkness behind him. He turned his head back again and then collided. Wesley nearly fell to the ground next to a fan of notebooks and the unsuspecting student he ran into. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Luca? Oh, hey, I'm sorry. Let me help. No problem. I was staring at the moon. It's a hunter's moon, you know. I was distracted. Hey, are you headed home? Because I am. I'll walk with you. Yeah, sure. Luca adjusted his glasses and gathered his things. Wesley helped him collect everything as if he was being timed. I think if we cut down this alley, it'll bring us right out to Maine, and then we can follow that down. It will. Why are you in such a rush? Oh, I just left a party that Scott wanted to go to. It was not a good time. I just want to get home and kind of forget about it. Sounds like most parties to me, Luca smirked. Wesley's eyes paused their rapid movement. Do you need help carrying any of that stuff? No, thanks, I'm fine. Wesley and Luca walked briskly through the end of the courtyard. Wesley walked a little slower than he wanted, but could see Luca didn't have the same sense of urgency. Luca, can I ask you something? Sure. You don't seem to care about having a social life. I know you're busy with your studies, but you don't want to leave your old life and make new college friends? Reinvent yourself? Not that there's anything wrong with you. No, I know what you mean. And no, I don't think about those things. I used to, but that stuff just doesn't come naturally to me. Found myself spending a lot of energy trying to talk to people that didn't have any interest in talking to me. One day, I thought about the alligator. Alligator? Yeah, you see, they don't spend unnecessary energy making friends with other alligators. They don't hunt in packs or work together. They also don't go out foraging for berries. They eat the prey that is easily accessible. And they do have animal friends that inhabit the same environment, like turtles and a little Egyptian plover bird, which will actually crawl into an alligator's mouth and pick their teeth clean. The alligator doesn't chomp down and eat the bird. So you're an alligator and you don't like other alligators? I'm not sure I understand. No, I'm a nerd. I love learning about animal behaviors and their anatomy and other nerdy science things. I don't need to spend the energy looking outside of who I am to make new friends. I'd rather focus on my interests, and other inhabitants of the environment will either become a friend or stay away from me, and that's okay with me. Wow, I can honestly say I've never thought of things that way. It's refreshing, and sounds much easier than what I've been trying to do. You're not expecting me to clean your teeth, though, are you? They both chuckled as they stepped into the shortcut alley.
There he is!
The disembodied voice startled Wesley and Luca. Somehow Wesley knew which guy the voice belonged to, even having only heard it for the first time tonight. It was the large guy French from the group on the party porch. Wesley turned around to see 3 figures emerging from the alley shadows. Luca was unaware of the night's events, but he easily recognized territorial aggressions from the male of the species. Wesley grabbed Luca by the shoulder. Run! Wesley and Luca turned back to the path down the alley and tried to put distance between themselves and the pack from the party. Hey, what's wrong? You got nothing to say now? The boys from the porch started running. Johnny was a sprinter for the university and closed the gap to Wesley in what felt like a second. Hey, Dividing Creek, we want to talk to you some more. Johnny's hand reached Wesley's shoulder and held on. Johnny pulled Wesley back and they fell to the ground. Luca looked back to see the capture and stopped. The rest of the boys caught up to them. Wesley grunted as he got back to his feet. Look, guys, I'm sorry, okay? I'm just trying to get home. As Wesley paused to catch his breath, he swore he could hear French growl before he spoke. You left before I was finished with you. French thrust his fist into Wesley's gut and brought him to his knees. But then, this time, he definitely heard a growl. Everyone else heard it too, and it wasn't coming from French. Come on, French, let's go. Somebody's dog is out here. I don't care about no dog. The growl got louder and closer. Sounds like a big dog, though. Wesley got back up to his feet. I don't care about no big dog. I just want to see what else this guy has to say. French leaned into Wesley's face and smiled. The growl changed into a snarl. Out from the dark walked a creature bigger than any dog those boys had seen. Upright on 2 legs stepped the same wolf Wesley had encountered nights ago sitting in the living room. What the? Luca dropped his notebooks. One of the party boys dressed as a mummy started running. French turned his attention away from Wesley and smirked. What is this, some kind of joke? Wesley slowly stepped back. The wolf stepped fully into the moonlight. A string of saliva hung from the wolf's teeth. Its yellow eyes shined bright and never blinked. Everyone slowly stepped back. Johnny whispered, Oh my God, it's the devil of Dividing Creek. French pushed up his sleeves and looked around, but the shake in his voice gave away his true character. Like hell. The wolf lunged forward and slashed at French. Claws caught his shirt and luckily for French, just scratched his abdomen. Half of his shirt was like torn paper. French looked down, saw tiny dots of blood start to form, and then ran. The wolf growled and everyone else scattered. Wesley followed Luca through the yard of the house nearest them. It got darker the further they got in. They both heard a scream from one of the party boys. It sounded like Johnny. They got to the back of the yard and stopped at a fence that loomed over their heads. Jump it, Wesley said before thinking. Luca grabbed the top of the fence and strained to pull himself up. They couldn't tell how far away the wolf was, but they could still hear growls. Wesley swiveled his head around trying to gauge their distance from the others and the wolf. Under the cover of the neighborhood trees, objects lost their edge. Shapes could be determined with some eye strain, but no details. I need a boost. Luca's feet scrambled on the side of the fence. Wesley grabbed Luca's leg and launched him over. He backed up and built some momentum for his vault. Snarls sounded like they were in the yard now. Still no way to tell from which direction, though. Wesley bounded to the fence and lifted himself up. On his way over, he heard footsteps. As he made his way over the fence, his pant leg caught the top peak and snared him. He hung upside down with blood rushing to his head. A growl vibrated through their chests. Luca hopped up and pulled Wesley's leg. The two squirmed for what felt like a lifetime. Wesley could see through the slit in the fence the shape of the wolf. With one unspoken surge, Luca yanked and Wesley kicked free from the fence. They toppled onto each other but quickly got back to their feet and continued to run. Wesley and Luca navigated through the grid of midnight suburbs. Finally, grasping for air and muscles burning, they reached their apartment doorsteps. Wesley fumbled for his keys and then in one swift motion inserted the key, unlocked it, and opened the door. They both rushed in and slammed the door. Wesley and Luca caught their breath, walked into the living room, and then froze. Paralyzed with disbelief, they stared into the same yellow eyes from which they had just run. Hunched like a gunslinger waiting for their opponent to make the first move, the werewolf waited in their hallway. How? Luca started to quiver as if his entire body rejected the reality before him. It took a moment to comprehend the full scene in their home. At the werewolf's feet, Scott was sprawled on the floor and unconscious. Shards of broken glass were shattered throughout the apartment. Lamps and tables were overturned. Luca fell to his knees. Wesley's eyes darted around the room searching for a weapon. There were no real options to be found, so he decided on his old trophy. He gripped it, upside down with the base intended to be the hammer. "You need to leave. You need to go." Wesley inched toward the werewolf. The creature tilted its head almost as if it understood the command. Wesley pulled strength from the depths of his gut. "Go! Get out!" Scott groaned and winced. Wesley was relieved that Scott was still alive. Luca was a ball of panic in the corner and probably no longer aware of his surroundings. Wesley's anger began to rise. His friends were in pain. His home was wrecked, and this creature stood before him and threatened worse. Then, to his own amazement, Wesley swung the trophy at the werewolf's head. The werewolf was faster, though, and stopped the attack by catching Wesley's hand. The veins in Wesley's face bulged. "What do you want?" The werewolf dragged Wesley by the hand into the kitchen. The clutch was too strong for Wesley to resist. He couldn't keep hold of the trophy and dropped it from his hand. The werewolf moved slowly with intent. Wesley knew that if the wolf wanted his arm ripped off, it could have easily been done. A chair creaked as the wolf moved it from the table. Wesley was placed into the chair. The werewolf's claws wrapped over his shoulders and pushed him closer to the table. Wesley sat in confusion. The werewolf lumbered to the other side of the table. The two kept their stares locked on each other until the werewolf sat in a seat across from Wesley. It was at this moment that Wesley looked down. Steam rose from a bowl resting in front of him. Beside it laid a single silver spoon. Wesley's brows knitted as he attempted to piece the moment together. Everything inside of him was screaming to run, but he didn't. In a rush of replay, all of the moments Wesley had felt the presence of the wolf played in his mind. This time, though, he saw that the wolf was never hunting him. It was protecting him. He realized that these moments occurred not just since starting college, but through his whole life. He looked again at the eyes of the werewolf, but this time, they didn't seem as yellow. The pupils were no longer daggers and had now widened to circles. There was a slight shimmer. Wesley uttered, "Mom?" The werewolf softened its posture and nudged the bowl of bone broth closer to him. Wesley nodded in acceptance and reached for the spoon. He calmly dipped and lifted the spoon from the soup. He paused at the moment before he brought it to his lips. The aroma filled his nostrils and soothed his mind. Then he drank it in. It was followed by another spoonful and another. It was unlike any meal he had ever eaten. He finished it like a prisoner who had been given the bare minimum to survive. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. This soup was unlike any food. He could feel it in his belly and spreading. He became aware of all the senses all at once. he could hear the moths at the porch light. He could see through the broken window and into the night. He could breathe the metallic scent of Scott's blood on the floor. The hairs on his neck stood up as he felt a power he had never felt in his life. For the first time ever, there was no anxiety, no panic, and no indecision. He looked across the table and back into the eyes of the werewolf with familiarity. Wesley knew who he was and what he had become now. The werewolf arose from the table and moved toward the door. Without a word, Wesley stood up and knew to follow. Like a pup learning to walk, he went out into the moonlight behind the werewolf. For most of his life, something like this would have sprouted a seed of doubt in Wesley's head. Being imbued with power, sensing all of nature around him, and shedding his fear-filled life had given him a sense of dominance in the world. He could feel a change washing over him, but it didn't feel like a shiny new toy. It was old and raw, and something that was there his whole life. He just never felt it before. That's the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed it. Special thanks to my group of early readers, Beth, Bevan, Mary McHenry, author and game master Mick McArt, my cousins Laura Belle, Sara Bernard, Vicki Vanaman, and my wife Julianna Williams. Story and narration by Josh Will. Music written and recorded by Stephen Bedford. Music produced and engineered by Calvin Bunn. Sound effects courtesy of Zapsplat.com. A New Phase is a copyright and production of Foshcott Studios, LLC. All rights reserved. Any reproduction in whole or in part is prohibited without prior written consent. Thank you. Come back soon.